to start, guys. Thanks so much for joining me on relatively short notice. Um, you know, Given what's happening in Washington, many of you have come up to me and say, "What's happening?" So I thought it'd be useful just to have this brief conversation
Uh,
about what I know. Um, and Obviously, given the significant funding cuts from Trump, uh, funding is really on all of our minds. Let me just say at the outset, we're not cutting any positions at this time. I don't see an immediate evidence that's going to happen. So I just want that to be really the headline right now. But having said that, there's a number of things just to bring you up to date on. Um, Obviously, there are threats to both our extramural and state funding, which really makes up most of the STAR budget. So let's talk about the challenging news first, and then we'll talk about other options. Um, I have to say, I really do expect some cuts in our federally funded grants at some point, um, but exact amounts are really unknown. Hopefully, we'll get some more details in the coming months. As you know, many of you are funded through PHS, Public Health Services. They've already warned us of likely cuts to Rhineland Part A, its harm, SCG, and care coordination, with final decisions really expected in May or June. I don't anticipate losing entire grants, but there may be a little bit of shaving on each of them, or one or more of them. It's no secret there's been a lot of workforce reductions in key federal agencies, including HRSA, SAMHSA, NIH, and CDC. It's unclear to me at what point this will affect program support and our funding streams, but certainly keeping aware of that. As many of you know, overhead rates for NIH and CDC grants are relatively large in many academic institutions such as ours. I think ours is around 60 to 70%. The Trump administration has proposed to knock this down to 15%, which would be a huge hit to our extramural and research community. At this point, there's a temporary restraining order which is blocking this, and it was just renewed yesterday, I believe. And so we're just sort of waiting to see what will happen. As I noted in my earlier note to you, I'm certainly in constant communication with David Christini, who is the Senior Vice President for Research here, and certainly is very much aware of the nature of STAR's extramural support. Same time, the Congress, I think a week ago last Monday, passed a huge funding cut, which was not, the sources of which were not specified, but the presumption is much of this will reflect Medicaid cuts to the tune of about $800 billion. In New York State, that would probably be $50 billion if I had to guess. It's unclear to what extent this is going to stay, but that would have a dramatic impact on our activities. Let's talk about a couple of, positive things. I know it's hard to imagine that could actually happen, but we do have a few positive things. We have gotten some support from private foundations. Many of you are aware that Mother Cabrini gave us a large 2-year grant for the reentry populations. That was certainly very helpful. This week we submitted an application to the New York Health Foundation, and we're actively exploring other foundations for general operating support to fill funding gaps. As you can imagine, many other programs similar to this are going after these same organizations, but we're trying to position ourselves as best we can. One interesting thought, as many of you know, the STAR Health Centers operate primarily through Ryan White Part C. This is a large grant, over $1 million we get every year. In early January, they said you could apply for capacity development funding. Then they pulled that back, only to reissue it the last few weeks, and we are now applying for that. That's going to be a sort of a supplement in addition to our AETC funding. I think it's probably a decent chance we'll get that. We're working very closely with the New York HIV Medical Coalition, which is really engaged in advocacy. And I can't say how important it is for all of us to notify our state and federal legislators about the impact, a potential impact on programs such as ours. Many of you are very much aware of what's happening at Downstate in the hospitals. You know, we were threatened with inpatient closure last year. And through also substantial lobbying by the community as well as Downstate and the union, we remained open. And additionally, as part of that, the governor at the first open meeting, which happened earlier in January, indicated that she was going to support a new hospital to the tune of $750 million and 2 years of operating support at $100,000 each. So, I mean, that was actually very good news. I think the slight challenge on this side is what is going to be the implications of these Medicaid cuts that I spoke about earlier, and are they going to be able to continue that if those Medicaid cuts become real? And the second thing is, frankly, it's hard to build a new hospital for less than $1 billion these days. So I would prefer that number was a little bigger. On the good news is she's going to be running for governor in another year, so she's going to want to have a lot of votes. So maybe that will help there too. I just don't know. That's what's happening. There's going to be one more meeting with the committee that's helping to decide what Downstate's transformation will look like. I think it's going to be on or around March 14th at Downstate. Really encourage as many of you to go there as possible. You'll hear all about it through emails, etc. I've been to one of them, and others have been to others. It's very revealing and interesting to hear what folks say about it. So I would definitely encourage you to go. I do want to, a large part of our funding is through MWCCS and NIH grants. And I'd like Deb Gustafson to briefly give us an update on that, since I think renewal is coming up. So Marion, can you open up Deb Gustafson for a moment?
Dr. Gustafson, you can just go right ahead and unmute yourself whenever you're ready.
She looks like she's still muted.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay, good. Okay.
Invite Dr. Susan Holman to participate also in this just short summary. MWCCS, we've been given the chance to renew for 6 years. The application is due May 2nd. We're all working together to create this application for the Brooklyn Clinical Research Site. And given Susan Holman's, success over the first iteration of MWCCS, we're calling it MWCCS 1, and now we're entering into MWCCS 2. But our site has, I'm going to say, the best statistics related to retention, enrollment, and doing the protocols that have been funded by NHLBI, which is National Heart, Lung, and Blood, as well as other institutes within the NIH. So we're sitting really good when it comes to the numbers. And so, Susan, I'll just allow you to say anything else if you want.
So, Mary, can you unmute? Oh, Susan's unmuted.
I got her.
Good. Thank you.
I got it.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Deb, and good morning, everyone. So, we still all called MWCCS WISE because, but we are, as Deb mentioned, actively writing to renew. And I want to give a shout out. One of the reasons for our good retention really is due in no small measure to the close coordination that we have with the Star Health Center. And I want to give a shout out to the clinical staff for that cooperation and support. People are able to hopefully, streamline some of their visits or communicate better with their providers through all of this. And we really appreciate that support. And that's it.
And I'll just add one more thing. We're the Brooklyn site, but we also have colleagues in the Bronx, right? And so part of our renewal application is involving active dialogue with participants in the Bronx. we've remained a women's only site, and there have been other Y sites that have remained women's only. Others are also recruiting men. But I just wanted to say it's a highly collaborative venture, and it's going to go okay.
Great. Thanks to Deb and Sue. I just want to finish a couple, and then hopefully we can open up for questions for a little while. We do have a hard stop at 11. Just a couple of non-funding issues. There's been a lot of things around transgender affirming care, and I just want to make it clear to everyone that we remain steadfast in providing these services. The New York State Health Commissioner and New York City leadership have really publicly affirmed their support for transgender care, reinforcing our commitment. And many of you may be aware that Jeff Birnbaum, our colleague who handles pediatric and adolescents, has really been at the forefront, both in the media and elsewhere, about highlighting the fact that we are continuing all of our activities in this area. While it is important to know that there's a lot of things on the federal agency websites where gender identity related language has been deleted and statements rejecting gender fluidity. We have been advised that some of the federal grant materials may need to exclude certain language regarding transgender and DEI, and we will address each of those as we get more information about it. And obviously, there's a possibility that grant-funded services may need to be modified if there are significant new restrictions. Obviously, we're monitoring that very closely. Finally, I just want to mention something about ICE. We have received instructions from administration what to do if ICE decides to come to our area of the hospital. I think the Star Health Center folks have been well briefed on that, but basically, one has to contact University Police. Individual staff are not authorized to accept any warrants or answer questions about the whereabouts of individuals, and ICE is not allowed in any private patient care areas. As of this point, I am unaware of any instances of ICE coming to downstate. So it's 1:45. I sort of promised to make it a 15-minute presentation. Amazingly enough, I've held on that. I think if just in closing, I really want to say that we remain committed to preserving all of our STAR programs and positions, and I'm going to give you updates as they come. Feel free to stop me in the hallway if you have some specific questions, and I will certainly circle back if there's something important to say. Happy to answer some questions if I can. Probably best if you raise your hand maybe, and then Marion can unmute you. Would that work, Marion?
If they raise their hand, then I can themselves, but once you raise your hand, then we can assign order.
Good. Let's raise your hands, and if there are any questions. Additional comments, particularly Kiki or anyone else feel that I missed something, please do raise those. Mention it. Okay. I see no hands. This is not a shy group. David, did you want to say something? David Odegaard there.
Yes, hi. And Jack, thanks for this overview and giving us this space to talk. You had mentioned contacting Congress, and I think this is more of a comment than a question. The grant that supports the AETC education program that Michelle Wilson leads and I work on is a Ryan White funded grant that goes to Columbia University. And the leadership at Columbia has been holding bi-weekly meetings with us to really discuss promoting advocacy, not passively waiting for an axe to fall, but proactively contacting our congressional representatives. And in particular, AIDS United is an advocacy and lobbying group that has provided a kind of a template for this time to contact your local congressperson. And I'm just going to copy that and drop that in the chat.
Okay,
I
that's
think
great.
that
Great, very much appreciate that, David. And just just as a reminder, I did mention that we're very active in the New York HIV Medicaid Coalition, which is a group of providers throughout the state, including the Department of Health, that I think is going to make a major effort on that role. Not seeing anybody else. Kiki, do you want to unmute and ask and mention anything, respond to David's thoughts? Let me just mention, Kiki's one of our newest employees, came to us from the Department of Family Medicine and helps with our political intakes as well as development. Kiki?
Hi, sure. Just to pick up on what David was referencing, there is a lot of advocacy going on right now. The HIV organizations locally, statewide, and nationally are getting together. I've sat in on quite a few coalition meetings. I know that Dr. Yeager and Jack and other people have also been on some of those meetings. I've been sharing the toolkits and the materials and the updates that have come out sort of within that group. But I don't know if folks would like to get, a more broad distribution of toolkits or, updates. Maybe there's a way that that could be sent around more broadly at STAR. I don't know how plugged in individuals may be, but I'm trying to attend the bi-weekly, at least, New York HIV Medicaid Coalition meetings, which is a wealth of information and updates. Sometimes very good presentations from law firms on various aspects of the executive orders and the status. So there's a lot happening very quickly, but I'm happy to try to share that in a format that everybody could access.
Great, thank you. Could be helpful. Any other comments or questions? Please raise your hand. Deb, did you want to say something? I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I know, because I can't find my clicker for the raise hand. I'm sorry. I'm like,
That's fine. Okay.
but
fine.
I really appreciate, Kiki. I think my comment there was like, if we could understand the language that we should use, what's the common message, and then who we should send these messages to. That's been something I've been struggling with personally. I don't know where to send this, and I'm not on that, whatever the list is. I haven't received anything, so I would appreciate that, because I'll send away. I can email at 3 a.m. I'll send messages anywhere you want me to.
Sure, I'm happy to share that. There's definitely phone numbers, emails, there's scripts we can use. They've prioritized so many things and made it very easy for people. So I'll share that information.
Something that I think David mentioned is that oftentimes the most important influence is a phone call as opposed to a email or a letter. So Kiki's got phone numbers. So, just picking that up and saying a few words can be very helpful.
yeah, and in the chat I dropped, if you're not sure how to contact your local House representative, like how to find them and how to locate them and how to contact them, that's in the chat.
Susan, did you want to say something?
Just that I think that we probably all areas with, or most of us anyway, live in areas with Democratic representatives, and our state senators are both Democratic, but they pointed out that you should still advocate, and that puts pressure, and it makes everybody realize, even the Democrats realize that this is truly important and critical. So Ellen gets to email or contact her Pennsylvania rep. So she's a little more influential maybe in some ways, but we all get to count.
Yeah, thank you to Susan, because she sent me the names and phone numbers for my representatives.
Hey, I'm also a registered Pennsylvania voter too, Ellen. So if you want to send me the PA people as well.
Great. Okay, anything else? Let me just say that as I said before, just feel free to drop me a note or email Kiki or I if you have any specific questions. I will endeavor to stay in touch if anything dramatic happens. And if time goes on, there isn't much, still happy to pop on a call like this and keep everyone in touch with what's going on.
Jack,
So just
I did actually have one last question, and I guess it's for
okay.
all of us. So I know that the YCCR that we're going to be putting that application in May, but should we be thinking about submitting grants and working on grants? I mean,
I've received no information to the contrary that suggests that one shouldn't be. Um, I can't. Obviously, for those of you that are interested in applying to the NIH, there's obviously always project officers that you can speak with about the advisability of that. But until now, I've not heard of any suggestion that we should do anything but keep moving in that direction.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't know, Deb, if our people with NHLIB, if they have indicated that like they really want people to continue applying for grants. Obviously with language constraints in terms of what we can say in our applications, but it would be really nice to understand sort of what kind of support we're going to have to move forward with applications this year. It takes a lot, it takes other folks on here, it takes months to put together an application. So we've got to think about the next deadlines, May, September, January, et cetera. By January, next year, it'll be clear what's going on, but we've got May coming up and September.
Yeah, so all I can comment on that, Tanya, your question is that we're moving forward for May 2nd application deadline. However, as an internal group, we are having discussions about appropriate language. And so this is something that needs to be thought about when you're submitting your applications. There was a discussion, I'll be open to this, Susan, you can chime in, but while we can change language for the next application, it doesn't mean that the previous applications had the same language, right? So, I mean, we run into the historical versus future keywords, I guess is what I'll call them. But moving forward, for example, in MWCCS, we are going to be very, I'll use the word neutral. I don't know, Susan, if you want to say anything about that, but just in terms of how the language is, that is a key concern.
I have been reading about people in the field getting their current funding pulled because of the language. I don't know how widespread that's going to be for transgender health. It was specifically for transgender health. And my recommendation is to speak with the project officers for new applications. But I know in the past, when we've been in a more conservative government, we've had to change the language before it got approved for funding. So I think that the project officer will give the best guidance out of anyone.
Allison, you're probably going to have the last word here. Go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. I just want to make a brief announcement that in light of the new political administration's anti-DEI language, that the DEI committee has decided to rename itself Star Up, which is Star Uplifting People. So, but we will continue doing the work that the consultants recommended. So, overall, the activities of the group have not changed. We're committed to the cause, but the name is different. With that in mind, I really encourage people, if you haven't desired to join, to submit an application because we really want to have all the voices that we can and the decisions that we make for the group. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Yes, very useful addition. Okay, well, listen, we do have a hard stop in a second or two. So I do want to appreciate everyone popping on. I promise I will keep in touch with you as the process moves forward. Feel free to communicate with me and our others about any questions or concerns, and hoping for good things, even in the face of all the challenges we're facing. Thank you very much for dropping by today. Bye-bye.